Hi, I'm Peter Burrell, the author of Marriage by the Book. I was recently on a podcast called Better Than Not, where we discussed that book and my book, Free of Judgment. Here's some clips, right? And see, I think we've taken, because now, just using the one little thing we talked about, Ish and Isha,
Yes.
Adam being Ish and Isha. If we talk about just that one thing, Isha has something that I don't have.
Mm.
Isha has something that she doesn't have. I mean, you're going to be different on these things. This is not a fault of marriage. This is a feature of marriage. So if you don't learn how to deal with this, you're going to be in constant conflict.
Absolutely.
So it shouldn't be a conflict unless you, and this is interesting, because I talked about how conflict starts or how it ends. So you think, well, strife is something I don't want, because that's where every evil work is. What is the beginning of strife? If only there was a scripture that said strife begins this way. Oh, there is a scripture that says this is the beginning of strife. It says it's like one who lets out water, therefore put off contention before it gets meddled with. That's a lot of words, but think about it.
Yeah.
You ever build a dam when you were a kid? Sticks and mud and whatever.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
Block up something, right? Little kids, you see them doing it all the time. They do it here in Alberta because we have all these little cement runways behind everybody's house to catch all the water. And there are always kids out playing after every rainfall. But if you just put one little hole in the dam to let out the water, pretty soon there is no dam.
Yep.
And that's where we have that one little thing, and we're going to just pick at it. And now it was about the dishes, and now we're talking about your mother-in-law. How do we get to that? Because it becomes a full-blown argument. Because the beginning of strife was like letting out of water. But how did it happen? He says, put off contention before it gets meddled with. So contention is a choice, and God's given you a choice. So if I choose to contend with my wife, she says something insensitive or unfeeling or just annoying or whatever. I'm using her as now, but it's usually me. Yeah. But let's say she did.
Presses a hot button.
Yeah. Does something. Okay. That's like throwing a jab. Okay. But now I have the choice. Do I return fire? Because it's not I'm not contending unless I choose to do that.
Yes.
Now this sounds a little bit like I'm victim blaming a bit, and I am, because it's not, there isn't two people involved. There's one Adam involved. With Ish and Isha. You're on the same team. You can't win when the other person loses, and you can't lose when the other person wins. You're on the same team. So if I choose to contend with my spouse, then I've opened up the door, I've let out the water, and now it's a full-blown argument, and every evil work is involved. And that's just what Proverbs said it was. I think it was Proverbs 13:10. I'm pretty sure it's 13:10 in that area. But it says the beginning of strife is like the letting out of water. Therefore, put off contention before it's meddled with. You think, well, okay, where does contention comes from? Go back 3 chapters in Proverbs, and it says that only by pride comes contention. Not one of the ways. Not one of the ways.
The only way.
This isn't the only way it comes is by pride.
Absolutely.
You were talking about in marriage, we've opened up about in ceremonies and things, and the idea that we always seen weddings where we have these 2 candles. Have you seen this, where the bride's family has a candle, the groom's family, and they both go down and they give them the candles? That's the 2 families, right?
Yes.
That's representing the 2 individuals, and then they light one candle, right?
To become one.
That's the unit, to become one. What do they do with the other 2 candles? They blow them out.
Oh, okay.
Right now,
yes,
most people have trick candles and they keep lighting them. Stop doing that. You've blown the candle out. This does not burn anymore. That's the pride.
This is important.
Yeah. Pride is the thing you're supposed to sacrifice on the altar. That's self. You lay yourself down on the altar of the wedding. That's the thing that you give. And then you take up the new mantle, like you said, the Mr. and Mrs. You took up you took up Adam. You laid down Ish and Isha. You took up Adam, and now together you become one. And the 2 are naked, completely open with each other, and they're not ashamed. There is nothing that you can be beaten up over. They're not going to take advantage of seeing your weakness, as Jordan would say. Now you're naked means you show your weaknesses. No, you're naked and not ashamed. This is a very different thing. That's why, since I know when those 2 walk like that, Ecclesiastes talks about it as, when it says 2 are better than 1. Because if one falls, the other can pick them up. Or if one sets out to do a thing, another can assist them or can defend them. If one lays down, another, without 2, there's no warmth. So whether you're doing something, whether you're sleeping, whether you're contending with the world, two are great. But it says, so if two then walk in agreement, a threefold cord is not easily broken. And I remember reading that thing, okay, you got two, two, two. What's the three thing? That's that third dimension. That's that God aspect. That's the part that gets filled in that you only get when you're in agreement. There's when two agree, I'm in the midst of them, is what Jesus says. So if you want to walk, so marriage is no longer about that prideful fight of who's right and who's wrong. It's about, are we in agreement or are we in disagreement? Because if we're in disagreement, we're screwed. If we're in agreement, God is involved in it, and he can maneuver us. He can make us, he can, even if we're agreeing to do the wrong thing, he can change our direction. He can change the plans so it doesn't hurt us, right? He can do that. But if we're in disagreement, we're in wrong. And there is a great example at the Tower of Babel where they agreed to do what was wrong. Now nothing will be withheld from them. So God confounded their languages, so they could no longer be in agreement about that, right? Because the agreement is the place of power, right?
Yep.
And that's where you're supposed to be in marriage. So, but anyway, sorry, go on this. I love this topic because if you can change, like you said, change your frame. I love the name, changing frame of reference. If you can change the frame of reference, then we change the internal thermostat. We're not fighting against the urges that's dictating to us all day. We are actually thinking things differently.
And it's almost as if, Peter, you can't get past that without changing that frame of reference, because it's like how where it kind of came from was when Copernicus and was going through the Earth was everything rotated around, orbited the Earth. That was the original thought, right?
Yeah.
And he comes up with the concept that no, the Earth orbits the sun. And I'm kind of going like, it's almost unbelievable that he was able to come up with that by still standing on the Earth. Normally, you have to change that frame of reference to even understand what that is. And to me, I think in many ways, this is part of, you've been excellent with your references with Scripture, but to understand that Scripture, I think in many ways, your frame of reference has to change. You can't stay where you are, because you can't see it and you can't hear it, and it's almost inexplicable. Like it's in a rational way to explain how that works, but it's like when you're in the heat of a moment, standing up and taking a walk and then coming back. It's amazing how that can change the whole perspective. But you changed your frame of reference, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
I love this. Your picture of the 3D movie is an amazing metaphor for this.
Yeah.
I've never heard that before.
Yeah.
I think that's was that something that you came up with, or was that something that
God revealed to us? Yeah.
Wow.
I just think that was the way to explain it. I think we were listening to, we had seen a movie or a 3D movie, or we were listening to somebody explain how they worked, and it just connected, like God just saying that's exactly how marriage is supposed to be.
Well, it's even that you're greater than the sum of the parts, right? Like it's one of those things that just becomes somewhat enormous in the sense.
It's a military context, but in Scripture, so it's a little out of context, but the meaning, the principle is the same. It says that one could chase 1,000 and two can chase 10,000. So it has a multiplying effect. When the two of you are walking together, it's not just 2,000, it's 10,000. So there's a huge difference. But the thing is, I'm going to act out of the things I believe. I can try and use self-control, but as soon as the fire gets turned up a little bit, or as soon as the heat comes on, it's that moment where you lose it and you think, sorry, that sounded like my dad. I hated it when my dad did that. Well, that's the only reference you had was your dad, because that's what you were trained by. And, my mom and dad loved each other, fought all the time and until they were dead. They never divorced, but it was terrible in the house. It was always like, as far as combativeness, and they had separate bedrooms by, 20 years into it. And it was, it wasn't, it was a terrible reference. My wife's parents never fought. She would never fight with him. He just holds his finger up and she stops, because they're very religious, and it was the other end of it. Neither of them were things we wanted. You're either going to, it's polar opposite. So we decide we don't want that. So we can live by our culture, or by our training, or by the people that raised us and trained us up, because that is our preset. or we can decide to renew our mind to the way Scripture designed it. And so that was what we said. So it doesn't matter if you're from Greece and your wife's from Italy, and so she comes from a maternal home, and you come from a paternal home. So you have a patriarchy, and she has a matriarchy, and you're going to be a conflict over power all the time. That's your cultural heritage.
Absolutely.
That's not anymore. When you gave your life to Christ, you died.
Mm-hmm.
That died.
Mm-hmm.
You became born again. Now your understanding as a Christian is, how do I live the Christian life where there is no Greek or Jew or male or female or bond or free? We're all one. So I have to learn a whole new culture. And if you can, so that's why I'm writing this like marriage by the book. I'm going through, this is the culture of what it's supposed to look like. So you can lay that over yours. You can, cut off the parts that don't line up. Or you can just say, okay, I'm going to live with it, but whatever. At least you have another point of reference that you can see from, and you can say, okay, this is an area we can change in. And if you can make 1 or 2 degree changes, maybe you'll hit Hawaii, or maybe at least Molokai, or something.
To your point with the Hawaii example, like you're only off 1 degree. You can adjust that 1 degree. It's not like you have to go 30 degrees to get it.
No.
You could make that similar adjustment.
You do 10 years down the road. It's a 30 degree change, right? But it's but initially, no, it's just minor things. Or you're always going to fight, like Paul describes this in what I want to do, I don't do, what I don't want to do, end up doing. There's a war.
Yes,
there's
in Romans.
War going on within me,
yes.
Right? It's back and forth. But he doesn't end there. He says, but I thank God through Christ, I'm able. Hope you enjoyed that. Don't forget to subscribe. And if you've got a question, post it or email me. There's a link below.